antes que voy a hacer la bienvenida, voy a explicar que hoy día tenemos un sistema de interpretación, un servicio de interpretación simultánea. Entonces, para explicarlo, los que quieren usarlo, hay un botón en el fondo del escenario a la derecha que dice interpretación. Si hace un clic en este botón, vas a ver dos idiomas. Si quieres escuchar en inglés, hace clic en inglés, o en español, hace clic en español. También el sistema da un 20% al idioma original y 80% del idioma de tu preferencia. Si quieres mutear el idioma original, tú puedes poner el botón mutear. And so I'm going to go on to English. Today we're using a system of simultaneous interpretation. If you look at your screen, on the bottom, the right-hand side, there is a button that says interpretation. If you click on that button, you'll see there are two languages. If you want to listen in English, click on English. If you want to listen in Spanish, click on Spanish. There's also 20% of the original language in the background. If that is distracting you and you want to switch it off, press the mute button and you'll just listen to the language of your choice. So having explained that, I'm going to continue in English. So first of all, welcome. Welcome to everybody who's joining us today. A special welcome to Dr. Jessica Campos, who's joining us from Cambridge. And Joanna, our chairman for the day, will give her a full introduction in a moment. And a special welcome to Nana Baffour, who's talking to us from Brazil. So we have a truly international event today. And we were just saying before the event started, this is an example of true networking. So we're connecting England, Brazil via Chile. And our subject for the day is about ESG and talking about sustainable use of technology in our businesses going forwards. So having given a welcome, I don't want to take up any more time because if we have people who know much more about it than I do, I'm going to hand over now to Joanna Paris, the president of our Technology, Innovation and Science Committee, to introduce our speakers. Over to you, Joanna.
Thank you, Greg. Bueno, muy buenas tardes en Chile y Brasil. Good night in UK. As Greg said, my name is Joanna. I want to say welcome to our audience. Most of this event be conducted in Spanish, but this time will be conducted in English, as I said before, Greg, in simultaneous translation. This time we are preparing a special conversation denominated Looking for the Technology Sustainability into the Business. The digital revolution needs to be inclusive. I will start in this event expressing all our gratitude to the speakers. We appreciate your collaboration and thank you for sharing your time with us today. I would like first to introduce to Dr. Jessica Ocampo Colina. She is in UK now. Dr. Ocampo has a doctorate in chemical engineer from the University of Cambridge, a civil engineer in biotechnology, and a Bachelor of Engineering Science from the University of Chile. She has more than 15 years in experience in the management and commercialization of research and development results from academia and industry, leading and supervising international engineer projects for multinational companies, such as Bayer Corporation, Procter & Gamble, and Air Liquide. Since 2015, she has been consulting associate for the Cambridge Enterprise International Outreach Program at the University of Cambridge. And in 2018, she became a member of the Center of Environment, Energy, and Natural Resource Governance at the University of Cambridge, supporting the technology transfer process in the food, water, and energy nexus. Currently, she is a co-founder and CEO of Camexus IoT, a technology company, a spin-out of the University of Cambridge, which developed IoT solutions for sustainable development. Both Camexus and Dr. Ocampo has received numerous awards and accolades, including Clean Tech Company of the Year in year 2019 and 2020, and recently nominated for CEO of the Year by Cambridge Independent Science and Technology Award. So personally, I recommend to listen Jessica TED Talks conference named Inclusive Innovation Start From Within. Welcome, Jessica, to this webinar.
Many thank you, Jan.
You're welcome. And also, I would like to say welcome to Mr. Nana Baffour. He is located in Brazil. Mr. Baffour has a Bachelor in Economics from Lawrence University and Master Science in Economics from University of North California, and MBA from New York University and Stern School of Business. Mr. Baffour also attended the London Business School, and he is a Chartered Financial Analyst. Over the past 17 years, Mr. Baffour has led the acquisition and subsequent management of a notable division of larger enterprise, including Vertex Data Science from United Utility Group, the MWB system from Tompkins, Consonus Data Center from Kestar Gas Corp, and strategic technology from GE Capital, amongst others. Today, he is CEO, Chairman, and Chief Culture Officer in Quintes Company. This company is one of the main suppliers of technology solution and digital transformation in Brazil, elected one of the most innovative companies in the country. The company brings together expertise with regard to strategy, innovation, design, and technology to position itself as a leader in digital transformation, developing innovative capabilities and with emerging technology, supporting clients and their journey towards sustainable business growth. All of Quintes' actions are informed by ESG practice and operate with a genuine concern for its people as well as the community Quintes engage with. There is also an interview in YouTube in CNN Brazil of Nana Baffour, so I suggest also to see this interview. So many thanks to be here, Nana, also.
Thank you so much.
Well, I would like to start with our term today. With a brief introduction in order that the audience try to understand what is the term today. In the year 2015, the ONU, the Nations United, approved the 2030 Agenda of Sustainability Development, an opportunity for countries and their associated to embark on a new path to improve the life of all, leaving no one behind. The agenda has 70 sustainable development goals to transform our world, ranging from the elimination of poverty to the fight against climate change, education, and equality for women, the defense of the environment, or the design of our cities. Today, we can see in Europe and Chile, private and public regulation include an element for ESG metrics. The world has changed fastly and very recently, very fast. Can technology help us more sustainable? That is the question. The digitalization of companies can help to optimize process and therefore to do it in a more responsible way. Technology innovation applied to sustainability could generate a lot of knowledge and provide key elements to achieve objectives in terms of sustainable development, which today are difficult to achieve. We have to be in mind that the demand for sustainability is increasingly present in the company. Now, environment, social, and ethical information is required for almost any department. And more investment groups are betting on green company. So if a corporation wants to access financing, they will have to present ODS reports to get green loans. To do this, the strategy must be designed to allow companies to be ethical and have a purpose. The main add value the technology can bring to the sustainable development is that the company can quickly and easily calculate their environment footprint. In this way, it is achieved. Cost anti-reduction, traceability and trust, resilience, cooperation, agile, and concise report generation. So let us always remember that the fundamental pillar for sustainability is a reduction. Let's think about what we need and why. Let us invest in innovation to develop a system that allow us to have ethical flows of another materials reduction and consumption. Circularity is a process, will be a key element for sustainability development. Also in the digital environment, and finally remember that the technology involved people, leave no one behind. In this context, I would like to start the conversation with our inviters. So we have the panelists here that they are special in this material. So I would like to start with Jessica, and also Nana, you can complement the question later. So Jessica, in your experience, could you tell us about your vision for your company, about the challenges in the project or technology, taking in mind ESG or ODS goals? Could you tell us your experience?
Yes, well, thanks so much, Joanna, for the invitation, and to all the attendees. And in particular, I'm very honored to be chairing this panel with Nana and also Greg as part of the chairman of this chamber. So it's a great honor. Well, as you say, exactly for us and particularly the company, and I would say that most of the projects that I am involved have I embed as much as possible the vision that as a person I have known what we are trying to achieve. So in CamNexus, we have been looking towards how we can bridge the gaps, particularly in terms of innovation capability, the local innovation capability existing in some regions, normally less developed regions, and how we can make that possible with an inclusive innovation approach involving digital transformation. So with that in mind, we put together the capability, the set skills of our team towards technology with a sense, technology with a purpose. So for us, and actually in some cases, it may be that the problem, it's not necessarily just tackled with technology. So technology is a means to something. And it may be that there are other ways to solve those issues. And with the agenda of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, which was set by the 193 countries in 2015 as common kind of a continuity of the millennial goals, we're putting this as part of the agenda. And we are using that as part of our approach towards all the projects and embedded in our culture of the company and the team. We tackle particularly SDG 6 related to sanitation, so water and sanitation. We tackle SDG 7, energy, affordable and clean energy. We tackle SDG 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure, and that is very important to work together with governments and particularly policymakers, organizations such as this one, the Committee of Innovation, Science and Technology, in order to create local capability. And SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, and SDG 12, which is Responsible Consumption and Production. So we really try to make that as concrete and transparent as possible, because I think one of the challenges that we see, and probably Nana here can add more from his experience as well, is the difficulty sometimes to put this framework into something tangible, measurable, and transparent, such as that not just the investors, but actually the consumers, the end users, can look at that when they decide whether they want to pursue a project, a product, or a service. Are we doing good or bad? What are we doing with our product at the end? And I think that is the key part that we need to embrace. And it's not just about being a green NGO or charity. This vision should not be just considered by default, just part of the social enterprises or NGOs, but actually embedded by the transversally, but any company. That is the mission and vision that we are pursuing.
Thank you, Jessica. Very clear. Thank you. Nana, what is your vision? What is your experience of this?
Yeah, thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Greg and Bridgesham in Chile. And a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Campos. Look, I think that there's a couple, if I look at the world today, there's a couple of big trends that have been going on probably since the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. And they've gotten more accelerated probably in the last 10 years. And that starts from, you know, the concept of capitalism, where, you know, for 50 years after the Second World War, it was going to win until the fall of the Berlin Wall and the breakup of the USSR, and it was clear that capitalism had won. And you know, a lot of us within capitalist economies like the US and so forth celebrated. And we had 20 years of capitalism basically being the law of the land, and every country aspiring to that. And of course, all the way from 1989 to 2008, that was what was happening. We saw huge amounts of globalization, trade agreements, and so forth and so on. Except in 2008, with the financial crisis, I think it became very clear that capitalism was creating a lot of complexities in the society, accelerating inequality. Productivity was not being shared, and that created a series of triggers that I think is because the world hasn't figured out what the right model. Distortion. You obviously have a huge amount of travel, of growth, demographic changes, immigration complexity. And the one theme that is driving all of this thing is the power of technology as a transformative agent. That's been the one theme that's been driving it. So on one extreme, you have technology becoming the biggest driver of value creation. And on the other extreme, you have technology creating a lot of these distortions. And the fact of the matter is that the company, the corporate entity, commercial business sits at the center of this whole dynamic that is going on. And so from our perspective, we think that technology is driving the world, and companies need technology to participate. And therefore the change has to start from the corporate community. And that change, we believe, has to start by the corporate community recognizing that they need to care about building sustainable capitalist enterprises. And from our perspective at Quintes, we think of a sustainable capital enterprise as an enterprise which recognizes right off the bat that it has four main constituents that are in some ways equal to each other and vary from time to time, but they have equality in terms of priorities, which is the employees of the company, the clients of the company, of course, the shareholders of the company, and the broader society as large. We believe that benefiting or prioritizing any one of these over the other is not going to be sustainable. And so starting off from that premise, we think from Quintes' perspective, we believe there's three big things that companies have to do if they want to build sustainable enterprises. And the first thing is they have to create very, very unique experiences. And they do it through their web interface. They do it through how they provide their services, you know, the way that their employees support them, et cetera, et cetera. But they have to create unique experiences. And we see some of these new economy companies doing that. Amazon of the world, Uber, et cetera, Airbnb. The second thing is we think they have to work very efficiently and be efficient in the use of resources. And that goes through their consumption of energy, their consumption of water, and all the environmental elements of it, as well as, you know, what type of resilient supply chains that they have in terms of making sure that they are constantly bringing efficiency and automation to bring their unit cost of production lower and lower so that they can build businesses that are more sustainable. And then the last thing is they have to use data to make decisions. So they are generating a lot of data now, and they have to use that to make good decisions. And all of this, we believe technology can be enabling all of these things. And so our value proposition at Quintes is that technology is really an enabler for building sustainable capitalist enterprises. And the only way that we can try to bring some equilibrium in all these different trends that I started with, whether it's the political distortion, whether it's immigration, whether it's demographic growth, whether it's climate change, inequality, All of those things can only happen if corporate enterprises understand how they need to build sustainable businesses, use technology to do that. And in so doing, I believe that because the corporate entity has replaced the family, it has replaced the church, and it has even replaced religion, we would be able to find our way forward in a more sustainable world. So that's how, Joanna, from a Kintes perspective, our contribution is really to provide the technologies so that the corporate enterprises can really do this job.
Thank you. Talking about the experience, I have another question for both. But before, I would like to remember the audience that you can put the question in the section habilitated for this, enabled for this, under the screen. You can ask something for our expositor. So please go ahead with the question about the experience, about the.
Joanna, just sorry to interrupt you. Joanna, sorry to interrupt you. Nana, we've lost your camera. So we can hear you fine, but we can't see you. So I don't know if you had a problem with the camera, but I can hear you fine. But if you can put the camera back on, that would be great. También quiero agregar que ya tenemos más participantes. Entonces, para ellos que recién nos juntaron.
Am I back? Am I back?
You're back.
Yeah.
You're back. Tenemos un sistema de interpretación simultánea, hay un botón en el fondo del escenario, si le das un clic y puedes elegir el idioma en que quieren escuchar. Bueno.
Thank you, Greg. So remember, question and answer is open. So talking about your experience for both of you, could you share with us some project developed with the ESG practice and the impact for the society that you can maybe talk with and share with us? I don't know who wants to start.
Sure, I can go ahead. And so, okay. as I mentioned, we pride ourselves on bringing technology to help companies bring ESG, and we have a couple of examples. But one of the work that we do that brings me great joy is that we are a significant technology provider for Caixa Econômica Federal, which is the largest bank in Brazil. It is partly government owned. And among other things, it is the bank through which the government exercises their function in terms of social support. And so it is the bank that during the pandemic, the money that the government put out into the economy went through Caixa. It is the bank that the government uses to promote, My Family, My House. That's a Brazilian program of having low-income housing. It is the bank that the government uses to support, people that are a bit lower in the social class. And what we do for them, Kintes, is that we are a company that supports all the digital platforms that facilitates all the digital transactions and all the card transactions and payment methodologies that they have. So, we have over 150 people working on these platforms. They are large platforms. Tens of millions of people get their monthly government benefits from there, pay their pension from there. And so that's the kind of participation that we are providing that we feel proud about. And during the COVID, for example, where the bank had to put everybody remote, but then it needed to increase its throughput, right? So imagine having to put all the employees remote, which we had to give them, but have to increase the number of transactions that they have to do to hundreds of millions of transactions and supporting them all at once. And Kintes was there to kind of help them. So that's a great example of some of the work that we do to facilitate inclusion and financial sustainability that we are proud of. We have a couple of other things, but this is one of the ones that we are most proud of.
Thank you, Nana. And Jessica, I know that you have another kind of project, very nice, or if you want to comment some of them.
Yes. Well, in our case, CamNexus is a company, as I said, that is spun out of the University of Cambridge. And we have been in the route of technology development since 2018. So it's quite a young company. However, the company actually is a spin out itself of a previous program or project that was student-led organization, which actually the two co-founders of CamNexus, which both of us are Chilean, while we were doing our PhD in Cambridge, we realized of the huge need for the developing of, as I said before, local innovation capability, particularly in order to increase the possibility. At that time, I was doing my PhD in Cambridge, that we could connect and make more impact with our research. We were talking of research normally at the front end, so frontier research, cutting edge research. And what we realized was that it was really important, and as Greg said before starting this actual panel, the importance of networking. Whilst we were here in Cambridge, we identified the opportunity to create a platform, a nexus, that could provide with the necessary skills, or actually to provide together the mutual benefit of the skills and capabilities existing in both sides of the Atlantic. And through that, in this platform, we were able to start doing project on research collaboration, which account for £1 million from 2015 to 2017. That project was super important and emblematic as the, I would say, making a clear case that it was important to work with technology and people in order to bridge the developing gaps in Latin America. Using the Newton funds existing at that time, particularly in Chile, because Chile is not long is graduated from the Newton funds, but we were able to connect with more than 50 researchers in Cambridge, with 4 countries in Latin America. And the natural evolution of that from a research perspective is being able to translate that into some tangible activities and projects. And actually, thanks to that, we were able to spin out CamNexus. So CamNexus was born as a technology knowledge exchange platform for research collaboration. The next move was the local capability building, which we are doing together between the University of Cambridge and Oxford, work with policy makers in Latin America and here in Cambridge and in the UK, connecting Nesta, connecting BASE, and all the different, the catapults, for example, in order to support the local capability in Latin America, such as that they can have a mature ecosystem of innovation based on research and technology. And then the third level was the kind of natural level of technology development. And that is where CamNexus fits in. So since 2018, we started to develop our portfolio of technology based on the main needs that we identified, that were the digital part. And using what kind of targets of the SDGs was low power, climate change, particularly looking into how to reduce emissions using efficient energy systems. We provide solutions that have an integration of Internet of Things with low power sensors, connecting and translating processes into digital processes. And that one example of that was the pilot that we did during COVID, which I would say it's not easy to run a full remote project of human-centered design, which we did last year and in the region of Santa Catarina. And that project actually comes from the previous research collaboration of 2014, 16, and so on. That project is particularly looking at how we can involve and embed technology in the rice production sector in the south of Brazil, such as they can understand the risk of water irrigation and actually make a more aware use of the resources because of the extreme impact that the climate change can have, particularly in that region.
In this term, as you mentioned, climate change. How can the technology help to the main crisis in the world that we know that is climate change? How you imagine that technology can help to humanity to solve this problem in the future? If you want to start, Jessica, because it was your last part.
Yes, well, I think what we really need to be super cautious of what we do with what decision we take in terms of what technology we're going to use to, we're not just talking about mitigating risks, we're talking about adopting specific targets in order to go beyond that. So it is really important that the perception is a kind of a second derivative of the ESG. And in that sense, we, and Anna mentioned, it is important to understand that technology is, as it can be an enabling technology, and enabling means also can create more gaps. And we've seen that, and we know that has been happening, particularly during 2020. So in our case, when we look into how we can address climate change, we are thinking in particularly what it impacts on our innovation pipeline. So we try to make as clear possible, as I said before, with a smart system of metrics, how we can address those targets in our own boundaries first. So should we use technologies that are, for example, intensive in energy usage? What would be the impact of using those technologies in our clients and the end users? Are these technologies sufficiently developed in an inclusive approach, such as they can actually address the needs of users, and users that normally are not digitally savvy? So these kind of discussions and decisions are really important to be taken and as part of the strategy. So when we are addressing climate change, it's not just about the environment, it's also about the people and the users, the usability experience. And also, and I think that is the really important part, is to be super clear about and transparent about our value chain. So who do we use to outsource or source things to? Why is so important to have internal policies and governance and transparency about that? Even as a small company, it doesn't matter, because we are embedded in an ecosystem, working with the leaders that are creating this path towards a sustainable future. And I am the leading in that here. So we need to do that. This is our example. So this is just some of our goals and strategies that we use.
Thank you, Jessica. You had saying something very important. The leaders need to be involved in this kind of problematics. So Nana, what is your opinion?
Look, I think that the issue of climate change is an incredibly complex issue. And the reason why it's complex is that I think as a society, for the last 50 years, we have created an expectation of what it means to live a good life. Now, as it turns out, that good life requires, or maybe requires is not the right word, but that good life is demanding huge amount of resources, and in fact, it's extractive in terms of what it takes out of the community, the environment, and so forth. But this has become the standard of what it means to have a good life. So if you are a person in India or in China or in Africa or in Latin America for that matter, and you are thinking about how you rise from a lower socioeconomic class to a middle class and to a higher class, your perception of it is you got to have a big house, you got to have a big car, you got to go on vacations, you got to buy clothes, and all that consumption is your definition of what a good life is. Well, as it turns out, to facilitate that consumption, we are going about it in the most inefficient way on the climate. I mean, I challenge everybody to spend one weekend and look at the garbage that they create in their house, one person. just being home for 2 days, Friday and Saturday. You know, everything that you buy, you got packaging, you got et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it becomes a very difficult conversation when we start talking about climate change, and in so doing, we start putting restrictions on people's ability to consume the way they want to consume. And so this is what creates the complexity of what we can do. And frankly, I think technology is helpful, but probably, in my opinion, what is probably going to be the most helpful and the most catalytic is how we can change the narrative about what it means to live a useful life, right? And so I think most of us, you know, I'm 49 this year, and I joke, you know, we have a business of 3,300 people around Brazil and around the world. And I tell, when I talk to people, I talk about how most of the young people in our business now, 25 years, 26 years, they are not thinking about a good life as having a Ferrari and, you know, living in New York and all that. This is what I thought about when I was 27 years old. And that's a good thing, right? Because they don't care about having a Ferrari at 27 years old. That's not what's important to them. They want to make a real difference. And why is that? Because the way in which over the last 10 years, we have begun to talk about success is beginning to consider that having a successful life is also having a sustainable life, it's having a meaningful life, it's having a life of sacrifice. And this is what I mean by changing the narratives. And so, you know, from my perspective, I think probably the biggest impact on climate change has less to do with technology and more to do with changing the narrative about what it means to live a useful life and be a successful human on this great earth that we all inhabit.
Joanna, can I come in with a question?
Sure.
As a panelist,
sure.
I'm not actually allowed to ask it on the Q&A system, so I'll have to say it out loud. But one of the things that both Jessica and Nana have mentioned, I think, is about giving access to more people, access to technology. And it's clear that we do have a double standard, I think. You know, the people who are on this webinar ourselves, you know, we're sitting by a nice computer. We have the benefit of being of enjoying this conversation and hearing about some of the issues, but there are so many people who can't even connect one way or another. And those people during the pandemic have certainly suffered, I think, more than people who can connect. And that sort of creates some sort of a social divide, I know, and I guess that's what we're talking about, sort of inclusion. I mean, an example for me is here recently, Jessica, I'm sure you're aware, but Nana, the government has now done 3 pension drawdowns. So it's enabled people to draw down on their pension to help them with their day-to-day costs and expenses during the pandemic, because so many people have lost their jobs, for instance. If I wanted to draw down on my pension, I can just go online, click 2 buttons, and 3 days later, the money's in my account. If I don't have access, I have to go and queue up for 4 hours, or maybe get there at midnight until the office opens the next day, so I can go in, fill in a lot of papers, and hopefully sometime later go back and queue up again to get my money. How can we address that in the short term? Because it seems that just access to technology itself gives a huge advantage to the people who already have lots of things.
Yeah, look, I think, and this is, Greg, you hit the nail on the head. And one of the things that we do here is a large section of our clients are financial services companies. And a large section of what we try to do for them is to help them provide digital platforms for people to use. But you are right, most of the customers of our clients are people that are middle class and up, and they have access to this technology. But what we are seeing that what really needs to happen, and I think a lot of this started happening here, is providing more access to more people. And I think, you know, the prognosis, in my opinion, is positive. What do I mean by that? Certain governments around the world are recognizing the need of it, because what has been the biggest impediment for more access, especially on the financial services side, it has not been technology, as it turns out, Greg. It has been government bureaucracy and lobbying. The lobbying by the big financial institutions to prevent innovation and to prevent access. And that wall has been coming down. So today, Brazil, which for many, many years was one of the closed financial services has become one of the most vibrant open banking ecosystems in the world. And I think the same is spreading through Colombia, Chile, and even in the US. So I think that government regulation recognizing the need to be inclusive in the financial services sector, and doing that by open banking, in doing that by allowing cryptocurrency, in doing that by allowing messaging services to offer financial services. All these things are bringing the walls down, and this is going to be, Greg, how we solve the problem now, right? And I think the technology already exists. What has been preventing the technology is big corporate lobbying against open access, and big corporate lobbying against open systems under the guise of security and research, et cetera, which is obviously not accurate. And we are seeing that now. So I think that's how the problem is going to be solved. And it has already started happening in the last 5 years. The revolution in financial services in Brazil and Latin America, just like in the rest of the world, but especially in the developing world, has been just absolutely outstanding.
So if I may add, well, Greg is an excellent question, and that is part of what it motivates us. Actually, what you mentioned is in the real, the kind of very tangible case of the end user, and which is quite dramatic, but that extrapolates as well in the business environment. And I can say my personal experience, I come from the more, say, the chemical process engineering background, and I used to work in industries that they were way behind sometimes in the digital part. So when we are looking into how we can actually create a digital transformation and make that companies can embrace this transformation of the 4.0, what we all have heard so much, even things like trying to be the place to host the PhDs, Chilean PhDs coming from abroad. We need to think that many times the conditions are not yet there. And as I have lived that as a user of technology, trying to be a user of technology in a scenario of where the KPIs and the core of the business is not necessarily digital, it needs to make sense. You need to translate this adoption of technology, this process of new technologies for an internal innovation process into the KPIs of the industry. And that is one key thing that has to happen just in that environment. So we see so I can tell you that it's something that happens at all levels. And even more, if you have the lack of find sectors with early adopters, which we have found, unfortunately, sometimes who are providing those technologies are not necessarily and I can tell you what's happening, particularly in some developing countries, not necessarily the ones that have the full knowledge of that technology. So if that means that many times you can create actually, how you say, you can scare off the adopters because they don't think or they don't feel that the technology had any impact into their business. It's not related to their needs. It was just sold as something because it was trendy or so. So that is one thing that we have experienced. And when we go with some idea of innovation, trying to help companies, for example, that they are not necessarily digital as a core of the business, the first thing is to understand what they need. And as I said at the beginning, maybe the technology is not the answer. And in that regard, understanding what the core issues, and it's the same thing with the user. If you're talking with someone that doesn't have a computer, but they use their mobile, and the mobile is their life, you need to find the ways, if you really want to create a better life for them, as Nana said, how to have a better life, no? How we can become that life environment better. It's not just about selling something because I have the opportunity to have it and then I want you to sell, no? So I think that is one of the key things. And more into the largest, I would say, a sphere, policy. Policy is really important. Policy and education. Here, we see that when we talk about capability of innovation, we're talking about education. So we need to go from actually the lowest level to the highest level. So evangelize, if we could say. Why it's important to have, for example, a human-centered design approach when we are developing new technology. Having a different approach on the procurement system, for example, for the e-governments, where we could embrace local companies, SMEs from our area, no? We're talking of footprint. Let's talk of low footprint in our Chilean region. So use those companies, train them, but help them to identify needs that they can solve with the tools that and capability they have. But we need to create a more accessible and open environment that can support local companies. And a final point, and I think in that regard, well, I have to say, Nana, I have been a bit lucky as well, seeing how some corporates are really embracing working in partnership with small companies. And I think that is a model that we need to replicate. And the policy, the government has to provide that environment to incentivize that.
Yeah, you are mentioning a word very important about education, about the academics, but in Latin America, it's not so usual work together in collaboration. So what is the importance for you and Nana? We are in the last minute, but in a few words, but what is the important in collaborate with research and development, public, private, and maybe academics, institutions to include the sustainable practice in the market?
Look, I think one of the things that we have all learned in the last 10 plus years, as the velocity of change has every year gotten more and more, is that it is absolutely impossible to do it alone. And it doesn't matter whether you are, IBM or Amazon or Microsoft, it is just impossible. And in fact, as a matter of fact, some of the largest companies today are companies that didn't exist when I started as an entrepreneur 20 years ago. So, I tell people when I started out as an entrepreneur 2002, I remember Cisco was almost going bankrupt in 2000, and it had a market capitalization of $250 million, believe it or not. Today, Cisco is, I don't know, 600 billion or some ridiculous number that is hard. When I started, there was no Google. This is just 20 years ago. It's no Google, so Facebook, no Instagram. What is the point? The point is that in the last 20 years, almost 30% of the Fortune 500 in the US, these are the largest companies, they didn't exist 25 years ago. And why have that happened? Because smaller companies and newer entrepreneurial ecosystems have begun, they have been the ones leading the way, right? Not large companies. Why is it that Netflix has become the biggest producer and distributor of content, when in fact, in the first 5 years of Netflix, they were desperate to sell themselves to Blockbuster, for those that remember that video service in the US, desperate. And the story goes that, they wanted to sell to Blockbuster, and Blockbuster was like, well, why are we gonna buy you? You just like, you have no value to us. Well, as it turns out, the value was they put Blockbuster out of business. So collaboration, in my opinion, it is the key to success in this new world, collaboration. And embedded in that, I think, is the concept of diversity, because collaboration for collaboration's sake doesn't work. What makes collaboration work is the point of different ideas and different backgrounds coming together in a rich soup or stew or a melting pot, whatever analogy that you want to use, to drive forward innovation and promote risk-taking. So I think this is the way of the future. And in fact, one of the key tenets of research and innovation is the idea of creating ecosystems. And that ecosystem is ways in which people are collaborating. And at Quintes, we are very focused on that. We have 8 platforms of innovation, and all of them are ecosystems that we create where we bring, people together, companies, employees, trainees, and so forth and so on. So this is fundamental to success, especially in this age.
Well, in our case, research and development is key. I decided to do a PhD in Cambridge while I was working quite safe in a safe environment, the corporate environment, after 10 years, more than 10 years in Germany, in France, in the US, in Brazil. And I decided to take this kind of risky approach and go for a PhD. People, I remember at that time, people didn't understand why. If I say, are you going to get more money? That was the question. It was like, actually, I'm going to go back as a student. And I have to pay for those studies. And basically, I felt that I personally have this need to have an intellectual challenge, and that without this if I was going to develop, that's what my dream, to develop something that could make an impact in people's life, I have to be at the frontier of that research. How to take that from the Olympus to the actual hands of someone. And I realized that while I was doing that in the corporate environment, I couldn't find the place to do this inclusive innovation approach. And I felt that I was just one small part of the very large thing. And I thought that maybe in the academic world, I could do that. And it was kind of something similar. And I had this opportunity to take a different approach. I was a mature student. I was not the young student coming just from my undergrad to do a PhD. And being in this ecosystem as an asset, so important. An ecosystem where it's safe to fail. I decided I have to embrace this. I never thought of being an entrepreneur, and I did it. So what I want to say here is, in my case, following this path of research and development is vital. We see the opportunity of collaboration and combining different skill sets. We need to have different multidisciplinary people coming from different backgrounds. And actually, for some of you that maybe don't yet know the difference, or maybe just to remind, when we speak of inclusive and diversity, so we're talking, that's an example I think is really nice. When you see diversity is that you are invited to a party, and inclusive is that you're actually invited to play the music list of the party. So this is the approach that we need to take. And I know it's not easy. I am here an immigrant in Cambridge, and we're both Chilean and immigrants. And but we don't have any last name that nobody can even pronounce, so it's not easy. But if you find the right, you have just, as I say, the ecosystem, but also this dream and vision and trying to create and make a change. I don't know what the future will be. We are all living in very uncertain times. It's very difficult, but at least we know what we are doing, and we have the vision, and we have to follow. So that is what I can say.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Well, the time goes very fast. So we are on the last minute. Once again, thank you very much for both Jessica and Nana. And I want to pass the word to Greg, finalizing the webinar. But thank you very much for the audience also. Great conversation. So go ahead, Greg.
Thank you very much, Joanna. There is so much content in such a short amount of time that it's very difficult to actually pick one or two things to reflect on. And I think one of the things just to reflect on, Jessica, your last commentary was you're in a position to choose to take a risk. And one of the richness that you've had in your life is your education and your ability to continue to educate and to therefore put yourself at the forefront of this new technology and the use of it. Nana, I remember when we were talking yesterday in our pre-meet, you mentioned your passion for creating new businesses, particularly creating businesses that had a real impact on social development and inclusion. And so I guess richness for you is having that ability and the opportunity, because of your hard work and everything else, I understand, but you're actually achieved a position in life where you can make choices. And I think that's part of the new richness, the new wealth that young people are looking for. And so for me, someone that's come out of this as being someone towards the end of the career, looking towards many people who are at the beginnings of the career, you know, this emphasis on quality of life and quality of experience and feeling useful and making a contribution with your efforts, I think it's paramount. And I think, you know, it's a wonderful example today, hearing from you both. So to Nana Baffour, who is Chairman, Chief Executive and Chief Culture Officer, I think, of Quintes, and to Dr. Jessica Campos, I can say your name, who is CEO of Camnexus. I've been in, studied in Cambridge, so I know what a wonderful place you're living in right now. But thank you both so much for joining with us today to share your thoughts and your insights. Thanks to Joanna, who's the president of our committee. Thanks to everybody who joined in with us today. I hope you enjoyed it. We've got some more events coming up next week, so look at the website to see if there's something you want to do. And finally, I think just thanks to our interpreters today. I've listened in a couple of times to the other languages and see you've been doing a very good job for us. So thank you to you too. So that's it. We're out of time. Lovely to see you. Hope to see you again soon. Thanks very much to everybody. Goodbye.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you to
Thank
all.
you. Bye.
Good night, Jessica. Good afternoon. Bye bye.